talk about morality as an end, and we know the institution of morality is built on functionalizing judgment. It is the institution in which judgment is functionalized, right? You are justified in appropriating action, prescribing action, condemning, judging, assessing, based on the moral imperative, right? So insofar as I am referencing the moral imperative to justify your punishment, well, if that's the end, if morality becomes the end state, then really and truly, I mean, it's almost impossible to make that claim, because logically speaking, you're like, well, no, well, that's to facilitate a judgment, and even that has other consequences and so on, right? So Nietzsche's saying that if that's the case, then what we end up having is a permeation, a saturation, an infusion of morality into all of existence. So what I wanted to do is to take a little bit of sort of academic license and infuse my conceptual sort of understanding of Nietzsche, and I do understand Nietzsche, and try and give you what I think is significant in basically all that we've said from note 1 to note 303, right, to this endpoint. And this is what I think we have, right? And not that this captures everything, because it's just too much information to capture everything. But here's what I think is important, right? I think what's important, what's at stake, and this is just my interpretation now, but I think it's pretty justified based on 30 hours worth of lecture. And that's just what I uploaded, right? That's not including all the reading and everything else. I think this is just my interpretation, right? It's not fact, it's just sort of what I feel. The image looks a little bit complex, but what I want you to see is that this is a systemic process, that the process feeds itself. So this is just an infinite process. And how does this process start, right? This is going to be a combination of many notes, and I didn't go through and list all the notes. I just want to sort of put this out there, end this 100-block section on sort of a chill vibe. Everything with me is a chill vibe, but end this 100-block section on sort of a chill vibe and let you mill it over, at your leisure. And if you want to go note searching and digging, you got 54 pages worth of text to search for key terms, and you have your book. You can cross-reference what I've said, your ideas with the book, and come up with your own assessments. But remember in 12b, he talked about those who intentfully design the system, right? Those who intentfully design the system. And I use the term handler and handled in that section of the analysis, if I remember correctly. You could use controlled and controller, it doesn't really matter. So what happens is the controller wants to impose a system of control. But what we know as the value positor is a technical term he uses, which he calls him the value positor. The value positor can't be seen as being the ultimate puppeteer, right? It can't be the case that those being controlled recognize who the value positor is, because insofar as there's a recognition that massive amounts of people are being manipulated, then it's easy to overthrow the system. So there has to be a sense in which value positors can construct, and he uses value positors, obviously he's talking about the sacerdotal class, the priestly class, primarily, and sort of God abstractly, but really it isn't God, because Nietzsche doesn't believe that there's a God. He really sees the sacerdotal class as being, and I talked about those, as being the true manipulators in the world, at least at his time. So value positors determine how the controlled will perceive reality. This is important, and I'm going to explain it slowly, right? So value positors, what did I say? Determine how the controlled individuals we're going to end up controlling will perceive reality. Right? Value positors have ultimate control, and I'll explain this in a second, how the individuals that they're going to control are going to perceive reality. How do they do this? They create a system wherein morality is the directive. Right? Morality as end. And we recognize, insofar as we're talking about a system of morality as an end, just like we said where we're talking about improvement, there's always room to preserve judgment. I want to make sure that my system, no matter how good or how successful the individual is, no matter how much the individual accords with the moral imperative, there is always more room for me to judge them. There's always more room for improvement. So, not only would I say morality is an end, but also, as Nietzsche says in one of the notes, I forget which one of the notes, that the idea of improvement is posited as an end. Now, what's the relationship between positing improvement as an end and positing morality as an end? You have to see that they're inextricably bound, right? Insofar as I posit morality as an end, I legitimize the system of judgment. The whole point of the moral system is to be able to justify passing judgment. But I can't pass judgment if actions are perfect actions. I need imperfect actions. So what I do is I make a system in which I impose, I say the actions that I am going to acknowledge are X, and then those who conform to those actions, moral, those who don't conform to those actions have the ability to improve. But even those who conform to those actions X, there are other actions that they might not conform, and I just create a system of regulating every single possible kind of mundane action or grandiose action that I can possibly regulate. So the idea is, on a very, very simple level, is the regulation of the totality of action. Right? Morality, properly speaking, at this level, isn't just regulating one or two actions or some actions. It is a regulation of all conceivable actions, right? Such that every action in and of itself, this is all false, every action in and of itself is already imbued with morality. So I need to create a system in which devotees believe that every single possible action is already imbued with morality. And I ought to reference the institution to legitimize my act as either being just or unjust. Okay, so the infusion then of morality as an end is what I'm sort of, and I actually drew that too high, is what I'm sort of conceptualizing as this. Right? The middle layer is phenomenal experience, right? And we'll put reality. I put reality in scare quotes because it's not real reality, right? It is reality as informed by the positing of morality as an end, which really is a consequence of those in control creating this in order to control, as we saw in 12b, right? So what's important, the addition that I never said before is, that's new, the novelty that I've just introduced, is the idea of what I'd classify, Nietzsche doesn't say this, what I'd classify as one of the consequences of value positors is the creation of a false reality. That is, a reality that is perceived as moral phenomena as inherent within reality, which is false. Moral phenomena as inherent in reality is a consequence of manipulation by value positors. Value positors create this system in which their devotees buy into the belief system that their actions are already prescribed with value. Not that values are appropriated after, not really after, it happens simultaneously, but not that there's an appropriation of value to objective reality, but that in itself, objective reality in itself is value laden, right? So what ends up happening? You have an infusion, right? So what I'm going to do here to make it clear is imagine that we have sort of this idea of blue, and I'm going to infuse blue in. So there wasn't any blue here before, but now you can see that blue is going to start to trickle in, right? Blue is going to start to trickle in. Blue is going to start to trickle in. Blue starts to trickle in. And all of this is a representation of my manipulation. Blue trickles in, right? So all of this trickles into this conception of reality, right? Reality now becomes infused with not something that is inherent within reality, right? When you talk about reality, you want to talk about inherency.